Hello grade 9 pre-applied. Welcome to this video on proportional reasoning. We will be going over pages 28 to 30 on solving percent problems. Make sure to check your homework and make sure you've done everything correctly, and if you have any questions feel free to text me. Alright, so the first question we have here is which of these makes sense? Why? 30% of 58 is about 12. And the purpose of these questions here is to try to get you to use some of your estimation skills and build your familiarity with percentage. We're not going to stress too much about that because fortunately we're going to have access to calculators as we're going through our work on quizzes, tests, and the EQAO. And so I just want to make sure at this point that you're comfortable finding the percentage of a number. To find the percentage of a number, we take the percent and we convert it into a decimal. So 30% equals to 0.3, and I do that simply by moving the decimal over 2 times and it becomes 0.3, or I could do it by doing 30 divided by 100 and that would also give me 0.3. So if you're ever not sure about what the percentage is as a decimal, either move the decimal over twice to the left or divide by 100. So once you've got the decimal, you're going to do 0.3 times the number you're finding a percentage of. In this case, it is 58. And so if you do 0.3 times 58, what you get is 17.4. So this does not make sense. And you've shown why in doing your calculation. Alright, so let's do the next one. 74% of 82. We convert 74% to a decimal. We multiply it by 82. And what do we get? 60.68. So it is about 60, so we right here makes sense. Good. And 100% of 93 is about 100, so at this point it makes sense to think a little bit about how we convert. Again, I'm going to move the decimal over twice. See where it ends up. It gives me 1.1. 110% can be written as 1.1. So I now do 1.1 times 93, and what I get is 102.3. So I mean it's close, but it's not that close. So we'll put does not make sense. Question 2. Each of these calculations is a step in the solution of a different percent question. Using a percent, what might the question have been? So the number 2 is asking you to come up with the question that might have been asked, and that this here in 2a, for example, would be a step towards answering. This looks very similar to the format we were using for the questions we did in number 1. And so we can come up with the question based on that. 0.35 is going to represent 35%. And in this case, they're trying to find out, so the answer for A is what is 35% of 48? That's the question. What is 35% of 48? B is very similar. The only difference is we have to think about what is 3 over 4 as a percent. 3 over 4 as a percent is 75%. So you could, to find 75% of 80, do 3 divided by 4 times 88. And to answer the question, what is 75% of 88? So let's just pause for a second before we go to C and see what we have done here. To find the percent of a number, we multiply. We multiply. That's the key point. We multiply to find the percent of a number. So, one way to think of it is we did 0.75 times 88 to find the number n. So, in this case, if we do that calculation, 0.75 times 88, we will get 66. So what I want you to stop and think about is, what if we didn't know 88? We knew 66. If we knew 66, then we would replace the 88 with the n, because that's what we don't know. And we would then get this, and this should look familiar to you. See, 75% of a number, we don't know what that number is equal to 66. 75% of a number is equal to 66. And what would we do to solve at this point? How would we find n? Everybody, I'm sure if we were in class, would say it out loud. We have to divide both sides by 75. And when we did that, these would get canceled out. And we would get n is equal to 88. So see, to find the percent of a number, we multiply. But to find out what the number is that 66 is a percent of, 66 is 75% of. So in this case, we know 66 is 75% of a number. What is that number? That's the question, right? So if we look back now at C, 45 divided by 0.2, the question that's being asked there is 45 is 20% of what number? Right? And so you could do 45 divided by 0.2. We'll answer this one so you can see. 45 divided by 0.2, and you get 225. That means that 45 is 20% of 225. And to find that out, I did 45 divided by 0.2. Hopefully that's making some sense to you now, but you'll see a number of examples similar to it as we go forward. Number 3, people often recommend giving a 15% tip for good service. If a meal costs $45.29, what tip would you leave if you wanted to leave about 15%? Explain how to estimate without using a calculator. So to do this with a calculator, you would simply do $55.29 times 0.15, and when you did that, you would get the answer $6.79 rounded. Okay? To do it without a calculator, you're going to find first 10% of about $45. We'll round down to make it easier numbers to work with. If I find 10% of that, all I need to do is move the decimal over one time. That's going to give me $4.50. So 10% of $45 is $4.50. I need another 5% to get to 15%. 5% is half of 10%. So if 10% of $45 is $4.50, half of $4.50 is going to be equivalent to 5%. So I could write it like this, 0.5 or 5% is equal to half of $4.50. Of course, this could be done mentally. I don't have to actually write all these things out. And I get $2.25. I then take these two numbers, because remember, this is 5%, this is 10%. I add them together, and I get $6.79. And you can see that's a pretty close estimate. Alright, so number 4, the harmonized sales tax HST is 13%. Suppose an item costs $89 and you have to pay HST. How might you estimate the HST on the item before calculating it? So you could do this very similarly to how I did it in the previous slide. Just calculate 15% of the product. So, 10% of $89 or 90, I'll round it. 10% of 90 is $9. And then 5% of 90 is going to be $4.50 because 5% is half of 10% and half of 9 is $4.50. So I'll just write it like this. $9 divided by 2 equals $4.50. And this is my 5%. I calculated 5%. This is the 10%. And then I could add it up and it's going to be about $13.50. Now that estimate is going to be high because I calculated 15% as opposed to 13%, and there's a way you could do 13% as well. 10% of 90 is $9. 1% of 90 is 90 cents. I need to get 3% from 10 to get to 13%, and if 1% is 90 cents, then 3% is $2.70. $9 plus $2.70 equals $11.70, and you'll see that's a closer estimate than this $13.50. But this is one way that you could do it. Let's not stress too much about that. You need to know how to be able to use your calculator. Calculated to do that, you just do 0.13 times 89, and when you do that, you should get the number $11.57. And then to calculate the total cost, which we have learned how to do many times, we do 1.13 times 89, and then we get $100.57. So you should be familiar with doing these kinds of questions. We worked on them a lot when we did the money cents unit in the first half of the year. Number 5, Anika calculated the price for an item including HST by multiplying by 1.13. Why does that make sense? Everyone should be able to explain this by now. The reason this makes sense is because the retail price is equivalent to 100%. It is the whole price. HST is 13%. And the total is going to be the retail price plus HST. So if the retail price is 100% plus 13% for the HST, that means the total is equivalent to 113%, and 113% equals 1.13. So if I want to find the total price of a product, including the HST, I can multiply it by 1.13 because the retail price is 100%. The HST is 113%, which gives us 113%. Number 6. Jada bought a sweater on sale. The discount was 30%. Before tax was added, the sale price of the sweater was $34.97. Figure out the original price and describe the strategy that you used. So this question is not an easy question, but we can figure it out based on all the things that you've learned in the past. So let's keep in a couple things in mind. One, that this $34.97 is the before tax price. It's after the discount has been applied, however. So if you recall, we have a retail price, which is 100%. And we have discount, and we have after discount price. So the discount we learned was 30%, and the after discount price was $34.97. So what is happening here is they want to know what the original price was. This one here. That's what we're trying to figure out. That is the question mark. Okay? In order to figure that out, we can figure out the other things we know from this problem. We know, for example, that the after discount price as a percentage is 70%. So now if we look at this problem, we can maybe, hopefully, make a connection to what we learned in question number 2. $34.97 is 70% of this original price. So this question is actually saying $34.97 is 70% of what number? That's what this question is asking. And if you remember from question number 2C, we know how to answer that question, because all we have to do when we're given this kind of question is divide 34.97 by 0.7. Turn the percentage into a decimal and divide the number by it. And when we do that, get our calculators out. 34.97 divided by 0.7 gives us 49.95, or 96 if we round properly. That is your answer to the question. Alright, so number 7. Ethan had $550 in the bank. He took out $50 to spend on a present. What percentage of his money is still in the bank? So the first thing you're going to do here is you're going to do the 550, subtract the 50 that he took out, and he now has 500. And the question is, what percent of his money is still in the bank? Well, 500 out of his original 550 is still in the bank. And then you can calculate the percent by dividing 500 by 550, and you will get that 90.9% of his money is still in the bank. B, how much could he have taken out if he wanted to make sure that 70% was still in the bank? So, to answer this question, we're going to do kind of like the reverse of what we just did. Now we're going to find 70% of 550. And when we do that, 550 times 0.7, we get 385. And now we can do 550 subtract 385. You can see how this is the opposite of what we did. Instead of multiplying, instead of dividing, we multiplied. And then now we're doing the subtraction. So 550 minus 385, and we get $165. So he could have taken out $165, and he still would have 70% in the bank. Alright, 8. The side length of one square is 112% of the side length of another. What percent of the area of the small square is the area of the larger one? Explain why your answer seems reasonable. So this is one of those questions where you need to take what the question is giving you. So it tells you got two squares, one's bigger than the other. And it tells you that one square the larger one has a length that is 112.5% of the length of the smaller one. So let's use some simple numbers to work with here. So let's say that this is 10 centimeters, for example. Then this side length that we're trying to find here is going to be 112.5% as large as 10. So to find that, I do 10 times 1.125, and that gives me 11.25. And that's because 112.5% is equal to 1.125. So to find 112.5% of 10, I multiply by 1.125, and I get 11.25. So I'm just going to erase this little line here, and I'm going to write it in 11.25. So that now is my side length. It's centimeters. And it wants me now to compare the area of these two shapes. So the area of the first square is going to be 10 squared, and that's going to be equal to 100 centimeters squared. And the area of the next one is 11.25 squared, and that's going to be equal to 126.5625 centimeters squared. So now look at the question. So what percent of the area of the small square is the area of the large one? So think when I do this, I usually replace the things that are being asked for with numbers to try and make it a little easier. So what percent of 20, for example here, what percent of 20 is the area of the larger one? 5. Right? I know how to answer that question. It's simpler when I use the numbers. Or you can say, what percent of 2 is 1? Right? And if I was asked that question, I would know I would do 1 divided by 2. If I was asked what percent of 20 is 5, I would do 5 divided by 20. So here I'm going to do the area of the larger one divided by the area of the smaller one. And when I do that, I get 126.5625. And I divide by 100. Oops. And that's going to give me 1.265625, a whole bunch of other numbers. And that means that the area is 127% the area of the smaller one. And it's not going to just like double, because you have to remember what's happening here is you're squaring the values. That's why it makes sense. Number 9, a new employee in a company only earns 63% the salary of a more experienced employee. If the experienced employee earns $50,000, what would be the salary of the new employee? So very simple kind of question. You're basically just being asked to calculate 63% of 57,000. So 57,000 times 0.63, and you're going to get the answer of 35,910. And so, very basic question, but what if, before we move on, what if they told you that 63% of what the experienced employee earns is 35,910? How would we use this information here to find that information here? Well, we would just do the opposite. We would do 35,910 divided by 63, and that gives us 57,000. So if the question had said a new employee in a company earns $35,910, which is 63% of what an experienced employee earns, what does the experienced employee earn? Well, then you would just find what 35,910 is 63% of by dividing by 0.63. Last couple questions here. Number 10, a town of 4,827 people is expected to grow by 3.2% next year. What is the expected population for the next year? So it wants to know, after it grows the 3.2%, what would the population be? Well, think of it this way. If the town is 4,827, that represents 100% of the town. If it grows by 3.2%, to find the new population after the 3.2% growth, you just need to multiply it by 1.032, because that will tell you what is 103.2% of the current population. So I'm going to write it down here. A is 4,827 times 1.032, and that's going to give me the answer of 4,981, and we can round down. So hopefully you're able to see that this one represents 100% of the population. This represents 3.2% of the population. We can add those together. We get 103.2%, which as a decimal is 1.032. We multiply it by the original population, and we find the population after the 3.2% growth. What percent of the old population is the new one? So this is those kinds of word problems again, which I explained I often use let numbers to replace the words to try and make it clear to myself. What percent of, when I say the percent of, then I make the bigger number that. So what percent of 20 is 5? So what that means is I'm going to have to divide the new one by the old population. So this is going to become my numerator, and this is going to become my denominator in my fraction that I'm going to create. Right, so old population divided by the new population, new one, numerator, divided by the old population. So the new population is 4,981 divided by the old population is 4,827, and you're going to get 103%, 1.032, because it is 103.2% of the population of the new one. And then what percent of the new population is the old one? So that's just asking you to do the opposite here. So now this is going to become your denominator, and this is going to become your numerator. And when you do it that way, you will then get 4,827 divided by 4,981, and when you do that, you should get the answer about 97%, 96.9. Okay, this was 103.2%. Okay, so those are the answers to B, and this was B, and this was C. So number 11, last question. What is the same and what is different about how you solve these two problems? A, I spent $40 and it was 24% of what I had. How much did I have? And B, I spent 24% of $40 I had. What did I spend? So this is actually kind of the central idea of what we've been doing in this, or one of the central ideas of what we've been doing in this homework assignment, and what you'll be doing in the practice handout that you've been given today. For A, $40 is 24% of what they had. So the question is, what is 40 24% of? And to do that, we do 40. This is A. 40 divided by 0.24. And I get 166.66, or 67 if I round properly. Okay? That is the question. 40 is 24% of what number? And then the opposite, B, 24% of 40. What is 24% of 40? I'm going to have to multiply. And I get $9.60. Okay, hopefully that distinction has become clear to you. Sorry this video is so long, and hopefully you've gotten something out of it.